If your evidence is good, it makes sense that in the beginning there must have been a beginner. But how do atheists respond to this? How many people have seen this book, The Grand Design by Stephen Hawking? Okay, a few of us have. And this book got a lot of press because Stephen Hawking is a very well-respected physicist who has been around a long time. And Hawking is kind of a medical miracle. I don't know if you know much about Hawking, but about 40 or so years ago, he was diagnosed with what is called Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS. And Lou Gehrig's disease normally will kill you in a year or two. Well, here's Hawking, 40 years later, still alive. So he's sort of a medical miracle, brilliant man, and he wrote this book called The Grand Design with another author. Let's take a look at what he says in this book, because it got a lot of attention, and he is a leading atheist. First of all, Hawking agrees that the universe had a beginning, and he cites much of the surge evidence we've already been through. He agrees with what we've been through so far. Secondly, he agrees that our universe appears to be highly fine-tuned for life. And we're going to talk more about the fine-tuning here in a few minutes. I mentioned a little bit of it when we talked about the G in surge, the great galaxy seeds. But Hawking's already agreeing with that. Now let's go into the book. And by the way, last night we had a question from a young lady in the back. She was holding her little baby, you remember, on this book. So let's go through this book in a little bit more detail. Here are some philosophical problems with the book. Here's what Hawking says. And before I put that up here, let me point this. One thing I like about Hawking is that he tells you exactly where he's coming from. He does not beat around the bush. He just says it in plain English. Here's what he says on page 34. This book is rooted in the concept of scientific determinism, which implies that there are no miracles or exceptions to the laws of nature. Now, what is scientific determinism? The lady here last night stated it very well. Hawking was saying, that every cause in the world, in the universe, is the product of a prior natural event. So there are no miracles, there are no exceptions to this. Everything is just a product of a previous natural event. Okay, that's called scientific determinism. What does that imply? First of all, this is a philosophical assertion, not a scientific conclusion. It begs the question in favor of atheism. Do you see that this is a philosophical conclusion he makes here? He can't learn this by doing some sort of experiment. This is not a scientific conclusion. This is a philosophical presupposition. He says, scientific determinism is true, therefore there are no miracles, therefore atheism is true. How does he know this? Because he said so. That's it. I just said so. It's an assertion. There's no evidence for this. This is just a philosophical assertion. That's why I said last night, science doesn't say anything, scientists do. And if you're not good at philosophy, you may come up with bad scientific conclusions. And this book that Hawking has written is just loaded with philosophical presuppositions that he can't prove. Atheistic philosophical presuppositions. Suppose some Christian said, miracles do occur. In fact, they happen all the time. And then you ask the Christian why, and he just says, because I said so. You'd say, well, what do you mean? Because that's an assertion. I need some evidence. He has no evidence for this. This is just what he says. Secondly, this also means that Hawking's thoughts in this book are determined. In other words, we have no reason to believe they are true. If every effect in the universe is a product of a previous natural cause, then so are his thoughts. His thoughts are the product of a previous natural cause, which means we have no free will, which means he's not really reasoning. What's he doing? He's simply a product of previous natural causes. He doesn't have free will. He's not really thinking. These thoughts are just coming to him because of some brain chemistry going on here. He's just molecules in motion. If that's the case, why should we believe what he says? This is what some might say a universal acid. that burns everything up. It burns its own theory up. To say determinism is true is to say, well, how did I come to the conclusion that determinism is true? Because I had a previous natural cause it in my mind. Well, how would I know then what I'm really believing is true then? You wouldn't. So he's just given up the entire show here by saying this. How can you be a scientist? How can you discover truth if this is the case? You can't. In fact, he says it on page 32. Free will is just an illusion. If free will is just an illusion, then so are his thoughts in this book, aren't they? This is a dream, basically. Well, why should we believe it then?